Hello and welcome to it. Today we're going to have a look at how to install Drupal on your local host. If you haven't installed a XAMPP server already or XAMPP, I suggest you go watch my other video on how to install WordPress with XAMPP. It will be split up in how to install the server and how to install your database server and how to install WordPress. So if you just take those parts out, it should be pretty easy, and then you can go back to watching this tutorial. There's quite a few options available for how to install Drupal. A lot of them are one-click installers, which makes it very easy to install Drupal. However, if you do it that way, you sort of miss out some of the core fundamentals on how to install it. And you're probably gonna be wondering how to do it later on and when you're moving it to a production environment. So I prefer to doing it this way, also because I'm currently running my own server here, the XAMPP server, on my local machine, and I already got that installed, where a lot of the installations actually come with the whole package. So you get the server, you get the database, and you get the Drupal installation onto it. XAMPP, however, does offer, as I said, the Drupal installation and WordPress installation as a package as well. And I think there's one called XAMPP, which is offering you a XAMPP environment, which is again your server, your database, and so on. XAMPP, however, is it will be compatible both on Mac and Windows. So if you haven't installed this yet, go to my other video, which I will put in the description, and just follow the steps there. Don't worry about it being WordPress, just don't do the WordPress part, and you should be able to go back to this video afterwards. So the first thing to do if we're going to install Drupal is we need to download it. So what we need to do, this one away, is you need to go to drupal.org and you need to go to download and extend, and then you just follow the path where it says download, and you're going to be prompted which type of file you want to download. Take zip or tar, whatever you want. And then what you want to do is you want to right click it once you download it. This file is going to show up in your downloads folder, by the way. I just copied it out to my desktop just for the sake of showing you. And then you can go extract if you have WinRAR, or if you have Windows 10 and you have downloaded the zip file, it will say extract all, and we have an option there for that. When you have extracted the file, you have a folder like this, and inside it you have a Drupal folder. Might be named slightly different because I renamed it to Drupal instead of having an extension. So in there, this is our installation files. So what we want to do is we want to move these installation files onto the Apache server. So how to do that? Click explore in here in the control panel. It should open up your servers directory, and in here you will find a folder called AT-docs. These are the folders are other sites. So what we want to do is we want to take this and move it into there as well as another site. So if I open that up and I say Control X there, and I then move that in here, it's gonna take a little time, so just give it a minute. Once I have moved it in there, we should be able to access it through the browser. So it would be localhost, and then it would be the directory name. So it would be Drupal. So if we go back to our browser here, and I go to localhost, and then Drupal, that we should see the installations starting up here. And there we are. So it's taking us to install PHP, which is what we wanted it to. Taking a little time here. Give it a minute. So there we have it. So before we get too much into that, I just want to talk a bit more about this folder here. So if you open that up, the one we just moved on to, in it you will find it a folder called sites. If you open that up and then you go to default inside that one, you notice you have two files here, one called settings and one called services. And what's interesting about these is once you do to the UI here, choose all the settings, what it will do, it will create a file called settings in here based on your input. So whatever you type in here will show up in the settings file in here. And the reason why this is important is if you want to reinstall Drupal, if it somehow messes up, you can go into this folder and you can delete the settings file, not this one. It's running really slow, this one. So this is just computer, it's not Drupal. So on this one, we then want to choose the standard installation, and then it will ask you about what you have installed. So we're not going to have installed the cache on this one, so you can install the cache, but I don't want to install the cache because currently it's just a development environment. You would probably want to test out the cache version of it, maybe once you put it into a test environment, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're just gonna choose the standard and just accept that the cache has not been installed. So there we go. So you will notice here, that's the cache I'm talking about. Just ignore that warning. Everything else seems alright here, yes. And then you can say retry if you want to install the cache, but we're just going to click continue anyway down here, and it's going to take us to the next page, which is setting up the database. So to set up the database, what we're going to do is we're going to open up my PHP my admin, and you do that by going into your control panel here again, and then you click admin here on MySQL, this row down here. Alright, so click admin, and that should take you to this one. So what we want to do is we want to create a new database. Click that, which will then take us to the section where we have to name a database. So in this tutorial, we're just gonna call it Drupal handling. Once it just takes a minute here again, just like that. Let's call it Drupal handling. There we are. So there, and you just click create, and you just take a little second or two and create it. So what we also want to do is we want to create a user for this database. So if you click on the database over in the corner over here, click the database, and then we want to go to privileges, and you notice we already have some users, just created some test users here just for the sake of it. So just ignore that. Let's create a new one. So you do that down here, add user. So give it a username, give it something sensible, whatever. Is it going to be an admin or whatever of your? So we're just going to call it Drupal user for now, just for this tutorial, Drupal user. And down here, I'm just going to set that to localhost for now. You notice that this is going to show up in your settings files, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're moving that on to your production environment where you have your live website, you want to update this as well. I'm going to show you that later where this is. So just type a password. I'm just going to call this, you know what, I'm just going to go up here. Just do that. Alright. Just ignore the generate password. We're not going to do that for this one. And then you just want to set your privileges. For security reason, you want to go over all these later on once you actually put it into your in a production environment. You want to do that in your test environment actually. So all that's fine for now. Just say go down here, and we should have a new user. So we're gonna need this user for our installation. So we just go back to Chrome here. So we have the database we just created. So the database is called this, like that. And our username for the user we just created, let's call this, and a password, so the user. So in advanced options down here, you will notice you got a port number down here, and you got a localhost. So localhost is fine for this case. Your port number might not have picked up on the server, it should have, but your port number is here, it should match that number there, so it's 3306. So earlier when I did that, this one, it was at 3005, so just make sure it's 3306, otherwise you're not going to be able to access the server where the database is on. So yes, just use MySQL, and then you should be able to click save and continue. Now there's something interesting that's gonna happen here. As you see, there's been a little time, and what's gonna happen, because Drupal is quite a big installation, is eventually gonna time out. So what you'll have to do, and you might run into this or you might not. However, what you need to do is you need to go into your app server here. So you go into your control panel, and then what we want to do is we want to change the timeout settings on it, so it's not going to time out after X amount of seconds. So in order to do that, you click your config and you go to PHP init. So you did that by going to the config, and there. In here, what we're looking for is a timeout file. I think it's timed out there. No, it's actually getting away with it. However, what you won't need to do if it does time out is that you want to find the timeout section down here. Just time. Oh, did you just go by that? Time there. So you notice here we have max execution time. So you could change that to 180 if it 30 seconds is not enough for you. So you can save that. However, when you save it, I'm just going to restart the server now, but you will need to restart it by clicking stop and start here before that takes effect. Alright, so it's done installing the site. Once it's done, you will be prompted with site, which is basically setting up the configuration of the site. So there'll be your user and the site name and an email address for it. So we're just gonna call it Drupal. That for the site name. Call it whatever your site was gonna be called. You might just be creating a test site or whatever. No? So we're just gonna call it hello. Alright, so that's the email address, and then we need to create a username. We just call that in there. And then you need a password, and it will be quite specific about what password you need to in terms of characters and so on. So just follow the instructions. Just do. It's not going to allow us to do that, so right, so we're just going to keep it at that. I think that's 12 characters, isn't it? Maybe there isn't. Well, there we go. So then you have to check your country. So at the moment in United Kingdom here, and then you want your time zone. So that'd be Europe, London for me. All right, and then it's do you want to receive emails or notification? I don't want to do that right now, and I want to check for updates. So just hit save and continue to that one. Let's give it a minute here while they're setting up the site for you. We should then be prompted with the user interface in a minute here. So we're going to start creating some content. So you notice this installation process has been quite slow. However, I'm going to teach you a little trick what to do once you have installed, and you could do it before and it might like speed up the process. It probably will. I haven't tried it myself, but it probably will. You see, the thing about it is there's a few tricks to doing this. You can either increase the cache memory on it, or you can also turn off the acidic transactions. And if you're using Firefox, something with IP as well, version 6, you can change, but I found that it wasn't really necessary. I'm using Chrome, so you can look into those things if you want. We're going to look into how to increase the memory of your server, the cache memory, to improve the performance of it. and you will notice quite a big difference really once you do that. So you just give it a minute here to just get done setting it up. So there we are in the background. So yeah, this is your site. You can start creating content and so on. So there we have it. It's fully installed. So let's just have a look at this part of how to increase the memory of your server. So if you go to config in here in the control panel, and then your PHP in it again. In here we then want to find the memory. So I think it's set to 16,000. Let's just search for that now. So down here, real path cache is the one you're after. So that one, if you were to increase that to say like that, to M instead, and then save it, and what you'll need to do is you need to restart your server. So just shut it down and start it again, and just refresh here. We shouldn't notice quite a big difference once it starts getting working. So now it's going to start caching the things, and with more memory you can cache more. So once you've been to the things, it's gonna take a lot less time. So let's try that again. So there we are. So see, it's starting getting pretty quick. There's another thing I just want to go over before we finish here is if your update failed, what you need to do is this settings file I was talking about here. You see it's created as we installed it. What you want to do is you want to delete this settings file, and then you want to go into your database. So in here, so you click the database, and then what you need to do is if it tried to install, it would install some content, so no, some tables as it is. You want to delete those and whatever is in the tables, and you do that by going up to operations. You can either dump the database and create a new one, or you can also go to structure, and then down here if you scroll down you select all, and then you can then drop them there. So you do that and then delete your settings file, and then you can then go back to your localhost Drupal and then you start the installation process again. Actually, last thing, let's just have a look at the settings files before we finish here. If I open that, you will notice if you scroll down to the bottom, all the settings that we just put into our settings configuration as we installed it is in here. See, you have the user and so on. So the reason I'm showing you this is this one in particular. As you remember, we set it to localhost. So if you want to move that onto your production environment, you need to change this one to match your production environment. And the same if you have a database it needs to point to and so on. You need to change it to the right users and so on. Alright, so I think that's everything for this tutorial really. You should have a version of Drupal installed now, and you should be ready to play around with. So see you next tutorial, and don't forget to subscribe and like.